The following is intended for mature audiences only. Discretion is advised.
Thank you so much for downloading this episode of So What Do You Really Do? The podcast where I, your host, Dead Air Dennis Mallard, talk to artists and entertainers. And the artist and entertainer on the podcast today is comedic rapper and crossword show host, Zach Sherwin. Zach is a comedian that started here in the Boston area before I moved here. He moved to LA and we would cross paths occasionally at like different shows and stuff. It's one of those like, I know him more than he knows who I am and kind of thing. Like, would be on shows and be like, hey, what's up? Hey, what's going on? Yeah, good set, whatever, this, that. Zach is hosting a show that is touring across the country right now called The Crossword Show. He's on the podcast. We talk about how he became a comedic rapper. We talked about the influence of hip-hop culture to young suburban Jewish boys and where it is a trope, but also there is a similarity between a lot of that. And we had a good conversation about my favorite art. I nerd out. I fangirl. I go total fanboy on him about one of my favorite shows, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and about Rachel Bloom and his contributions to the show. You might also know him best from the Epic Rap Battles of History, which is a YouTube show where he is both a writer and performer on the show, where he helps write rap battles of epic people in history, like Albert Einstein versus Stephen Hawkins and other episodes. If you've seen it, it's on there on the YouTube. You can check it out. Zach is currently touring that show, The Crossword Show. In fact, he's going to be here in Boston on June 21st doing the Crossword Show at the WBUR City Space. That's actually why he's on the show, is help promoting it. So if you're in the Boston area, buy tickets. Go to it. You can get tickets at ZachSherwin.com or crosswordshow.com. Find out more about the Crossword Show and help support him. He's also coming to a city near you with the show. It's going to be going to New Hampshire and my friends in Washington, D.C. as well. We'll talk more about the show and the tour later in the episode. But I wanted to, he reached out to me and was like, hey, do you want to do an interview with me for Dig Boston to help promote my show? And I was like, well, unfortunately, Dig Boston's no more, which is, I don't know why. I don't know the reasons behind it. I am saddened by it, so I am no longer, I guess I'm technically no longer a writer. So, writer for hire, maybe, probably not. I'm okay with not being a writer anymore. Unfortunately, the rest of the staff, though, at Dig Boston are still doing great work with Binge, B-I-N-J, the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism. They're still fighting the good fight of telling the stories and uplifting the voices that do not traditionally get to be told here in the Boston area. And they're all doing it as a non-for-profit. So you should check out BINJ, Binge, as they like to call it, the Boston Institute of Nonprofit Journalism, and support them and their writers as well. There is no need for nonprofit comedian writing. So there we go. That's the difference. So, which, by the way, speaking of me, I don't know if you could tell, for all our audio listeners, you cannot. But if you go to the YouTube, Big Comedy Network on YouTube, you can watch the episode and you can see that I am quite sunburned from my second season of working with Boston Duck Tours. I'm being, just killing myself. I'm at, right as of the time of this recording, I should be at over 160 80-plus minute tours for the season. My voice is holding up. It sounds a lot better. It doesn't sound normal. It's definitely a little bit strained, a little bit cracky, but it sounds so much better than it did at this time last year, at the beginning of June of last year, when I just even started getting it. I sounded like this, and Harvey Firestein. But we'll see how much longer the voice can hold up, because I am really pushing myself to the limits so far at the beginning of the season. Like I said, I'm at 160 plus tours, maybe almost 170, and I am the after my good friend Ted Pettengale, Boston comedian and duck tour narrator Ted Bettengale, I am the second most amount of tours in the company, and that's because Ted is an idiot. I mean, he's great at what he does, but he works entirely too hard and kills himself, and I'm killing myself, but nowhere nearly as much as he is, and I don't intend to. So pretty soon I'm going to start pulling back on the amount of tours I do when the season picks up and gets into full swing. I'll balance the things out a little bit. All right, I want to do some work, but I definitely got to start with the sunblock. But the worst part is like it's red on top, and then there's just a stripe of not sunburned right in the middle, right above my eyes here, because I wear a headband, and the headband has been protecting my head from the sun. Maybe I should switch back to my hat, but for my character. But it has been quite the interesting second season. I've been enjoying it. And we've had some really good tours. It's weird being a part of the season when it begins now, because I jumped in right at this time last year, at the end of May, early June, when the season started kicking in. So it's like I'm jumping in at the height of the season, but starting at late March, early April, and then running all the way to now. It's interesting seeing the change in the amount of tours, how much the weather has affected things, and other factors to the business. But it's going to be a good, fun season, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the off season. That's what I'm waiting for. We'll see what happens this winter. But anyway, speaking of let's see what's happened, let's see what happens with my conversation with comedian, rapper, and crossword show host, Zach Sherwin. So we were talking about schedule there. You have your busy schedule, which is, you're touring around. You just said you got married, which congratulations on getting married.
Thank you.
I'm glad, you found somebody.
Thank you.
And it works out for you. So how has the touring around been so far because you're touring a new live show, and you're touring, as a comedian too. So how has the past couple of weeks of touring been going?
It's been really good. So far this year, the major events have been, we did San Francisco Sketch Fest, which is always incredible. And then we did a show at KQED in San Francisco, which is like their public radio live event space, basically the WBUR city space of SF.
Okay.
And that's always awesome. And then we did a couple shows at the Netflix is a Joke Festival, which just took over Los Angeles for 2 weekends last month.
It's almost a prestigious honor to be part of the Netflix is a Joke Festival. And then when you look at the lineup, it's like, they just took everybody, so maybe it's not as prestigious.
It felt prestigious. I maintain my prestige. I insist on my prestige. But then I just got back literally yesterday for a non-crossword show gig, which was my second year of doing audience warm-up for the live taping of the National Spelling Bee Finals. They don't televise any of the rounds up, or they televise the semifinals, but then the big show is the finals, obviously. And I think before, like in 2023 and before, basically the way the show runs is that when a speller gets eliminated, they go to commercial while they kind of reset and get ready for the next rounds. And they kind of just they would bring up some music in the room, but it was kind of like a bummer because a kid just like had their dreams crushed in front of a whole room of spectators. So were
this
like,
kid's crying. Let's bring out the funny man.
That's what it is now. And man, it is the dream gig for a word nerd with camp counselor energy like me. Like, I love, these kids are hilarious. They're all quirky and interesting and smart as hell. And it's the best gig. They go to commercial and I run out and just da-da-da-da-da. It's so fun. I hope I can do it forever. It's like the best gig.
Is this a gig you pitched them, or is this something that came about because you've already been doing warm up and they're like, hey, you know what? Let's get somebody in here. Here's a guy that's perfect for it.
I got to shout out my friend Ben Zimmer. He is, if you know, he's like one of the most interesting and thoughtful and interested language people out there. He writes a weekly column for the Wall Street Journal about language. I'm jealous that he has like a pointillistic caricature of him that they made for the paper, like the Wall Street Journal does. But yeah, he works on the word panel is what the inner circle is called at the B. And they were like, does anyone know anyone who could do this job? And he is a fan of the crossword show and has become a close friend and was like, get Zach. And I don't think he knew that I had done audience warm up in the past, but I do have some experience with it. So, and here's the crazy thing. Right when I started writing raps, one of the very first raps I ever wrote was about my experience flaming out at the Ohio State Spelling Bee when I was in 6th grade. And if I had spelled that word right, I would have gone to nationals. And so in an amazing long game payoff, like more than exactly 3 decades later, I was at the National Spelling Bee, but rapping the song I wrote about, it just is too meta. My brain can't handle it.
This is the circle of life.
Yes.
If you had not lost that spelling bee, you would not be at the National Spelling Bee Championships rapping about losing at the spelling bees.
And the crazy part is the word I lost on was Hakuna Matata. So even the Lion King thing.
Perfect. I love it. Oh, so all right. Let's so you've done warm up for like when you're a comedian, your gigs of like recommendations for gigs, always you find these new skills. Like when I first moved to Boston, somebody had tweeted the Boston calendar like a couple months, 6 months, maybe a year after I moved here. The Boston calendar just tweeted out randomly like, "Hey, looking for someone who can host a Connect Four tournament." And a friend of mine from DC somehow saw the retweet from somebody else in their Twitter feed, and they just went, "Hey, Dead or Dennis would be perfect for that," because they know I'm a comedian and I'm now in Boston. And they're like, "Hey, you should go talk to him." And that's how I got friends with the Boston calendar, and I got to host. And honestly, that might have actually been my first paid comedy gig, was hosting a Connect Four at a brewery, which is like, I've hosted a lot of things for radio shows, you know, because I worked for a bunch of radio stations, and most of my hosting job was introducing cover bands, going, "All right, everybody, we've got beer specials over in the back. We've got T-shirts and stickers for the radio station over here. And then here's the Amish Outlaws doing their version of the Beastie Boys. Have fun." And that's basically.
I love Amish Outlaws.
So it's, yeah, I've introduced Amish Outlaws on stage more times than I can honestly.
Is that a real band? I thought you made it.
Oh, they
up.
are. Yes. No.
Okay.
I thought you actually knew who they were.
No.
The Amish Outlaws is a cover band from the Mid-Atlantic area where I'm from, the Maryland, D.C., Pennsylvania area, and they are guys that dress like Amish guys, and they are just a straight up rock and roll cover band.
That's incredible.
Of stuff dressed like Amish dudes, and they're fun and they're kitschy, and they are. And I've also done introduced some really bad cover bands too. So.
Well, I think, you know, when these random gigs, like the main job is like doing a comedy set, you know, but then these random gigs that you do because you do the thing for a while and you meet people and they have ideas. Like when I heard that the spelling bee gig was an option, I was like, I might not wind up being the person who gets hired for this, but like if they do hire me, I will be a person who is well equipped to handle this because I like kids, I like words, I've been a teacher, I was in the spelling bee myself. Like I just was like, it's a very organic fit. And similarly, it sounds like when you hear about the Connect Four thing, you're like, not like I should or like I deserve to be the guy, but like I am eligible for this gig. And so most of the time these things don't work out and sometimes they do. And you're like, this was a right way for it to go. And I'm glad that it does when it does.
Well, see, as a all right, let's start with the beginning of things because I know how I got into comedy. Mm-hmm. It's because I listened to Sam Kinison and Dennis Leary, and I would walk around school just reciting, No Cure for Cancer to people, and then started, did my first stand-up set was 4th grade. Like I always knew that I was going to be on this path of hosting things, emceeing, being a comedian. Right. I loved radio. I loved stand-up. This was my path. My path was to be standing on a stage and going, and your next thing is, right. Well, for you as a comedian, we'll talk about that in a second, but I'm more curious where the rapping came in because, we're the same age, we're a couple months apart. You were born in 80. I was born in 81. Sorry, I told everyone what your age is, but we're the same age.
That's fine.
I'm okay with it. But we grew up with the beginning of hip hop. Basically, when you're a kid and grew up in the 80s, when you're Gen X, we saw the beginning of the hip hop era. Like we saw the decline or the change of disco into hip hop, for the people of color culture. And then, of course, throughout the 80s, the beginning and the immersing of like Run DMC and all that stuff. And then the gangster rap of the 90s and stuff like that and progressed into what it is now. It's always had a stereotypical audience. Obviously, it speaks to a certain group of people. That is their culture. So sometimes when you have, I guess there's the dichotomy of, we've made plenty of jokes over it in the media over the years of the Jewish kid who really loves hip hop. And there's that like, oh, this is not supposed to be for them. But it's still like being able to rhyme words is not significant to only one group of people. Like we've been rhyming for years. So what was your introduction into hip hop and rapping?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're speaking to a lot of the complications and tensions of being a white fan of, and then eventually participant in hip hop culture, which definitely is a black art form that has like turned into this global phenomenon and is arguably like the dominant culture of the world. I mean, pop culture sort of is, it doesn't exist without hip hop. But yeah, I mean, I got into it. I got into it when I was like 10 or 11. And I mean, like in a foretelling of things to come, my uncle asked me what I wanted for Hanukkah. And I had seen the OPP music video by Naughty by Nature over at my friends on MTV. And I was like, I want that whole album. And so for a Hanukkah present, the little Jewish kid from Ohio got the like pretty hardcore for the time, and very like verbally dexterous and intricate Naughty by Nature album. And so I think I was so sheltered and so cushioned by my various categories of privilege that I was like, this is something I could and should be doing. I just was talking with someone about how there's a song on that album called Pin the Tail of the Donkey on the Donkey. And on it, Tretch, the lead rapper from Naughty by Nature, has a lyric where he goes, THEMCOFRAPTOLKATINTHENINETIES, which spells the MC of rap to look at in the 90s. And so I'm like, I was like, this was my first rap album ever. How could I not wind up rapping at the spelling bee? Like it just is, you know what I mean? It all interlocks. But yeah, I mean, I think for a long time I was writing raps that were, I was dazzled and like entranced by the like wit and the way that the things that they were doing with language in the raps that I was listening to. Naughty by Nature, Heavy D and the Boys, Tribe Called Quest, Wu-Tang Clan, you know, all those like early 90s huge hitting acts. But yeah, I was instantly like, this is something that I get how to do my version of, and I'm gonna imitate these guys. And so for a while, I think I was just like, I loved it so much that I just wanted to participate in it in any way I could. And so I wrote raps about like what a hard like life I'd lived and like the crime and, you know, violence and all the other stuff that I'd been involved in, none of which was obviously true. My mom had a career as a rabbi. She's retired now, but I was like a sweet little nerdy bookish kid. But I mean, I think it's no like, hip hop was so edgy sounding and it was so completely foreign that the like exoticness, I mean, it's kind of messed up that like you get to participate in the thrill and the danger of it without having to actually experience any of the danger that like was part of the lives that these rappers are talking about. I mean, it's all very complicated and there's lots of like, but yeah, it was thrilling to be like, I'm going to write these rhymes too. And so this answer is too long. Let me pause for you to say something.
No, I love hearing it because I grew up in the world of punk rock and I can understand someone like me. Like punk rock has always had a community and a family aspect to it in that you are creating a family. Your friends are your family. Like H2O, when the hardcore punk bands out there from the New York scene has a song called that is My Friends Look Out for Me Like Family. And that's always been one of the kind of defining attitudes of punk rock is that your family is who you make it. That's along with like protest music and fuck authority and do your own thing and all these things that are synonymous with punk was very spoke to me as someone who has trouble with at home. Family problems, bullies, and you have to find the family of the people that are going to look out for you when you are in the street, the playground, getting picked on by a kid. Who's going to stand next to you against that bully, and stuff like that. And that's why punk rock spoke to me. But for someone like you, who is a lyrical wordsmith, someone who loves words, hip hop is the perfect avenue for someone like that, where you like wordplay. Because honestly, I think there is no better form of wordplay and rhyme and wordsmithing than hip hop. I mean, there's many great lyricists out there and they have the opportunity of being more abstract when it comes to like different genres of mainstream music. But hip hop's very unabstract. It's very literal, but you also have to be smart and clever with their wordplays. I mean, it's true poetry. And all music in general is poetry, lyric writing, but I think there's such a different, beautiful art form to the wordplay and smithery of hip hop.
Yeah, do you know, there's a comedy rapper and comedian named Howard Kramer who sometimes goes by the name Dragon Boy Suede, and I've heard him talk about just like if you write a rock song, you know, you write a verse and there's 4 lines in it, and then there's like a chorus that you sing again, and then there's a second verse, and then maybe there's a bridge, and then your third chorus, and you're done. Whereas like in a hip hop song, there's like so many more lyrics just in the course of the 3 minutes. Like rests aren't really a thing. You know, it's just like a torrent of words. And so, yeah, it's this like hyperverbal art form. So, yeah, you know, I wrote like my kind of path was that like I wrote more raps about like how just in direct imitation of the rappers that I was listening to. And then enough self-consciousness crept in that I was like, it's more appropriate for me to rap about like what a good rapper I am, which was also a very clearly established lane. And that's like going to be like a more hospitable place for me to be creative and express myself. And then eventually I was like, nah, not even that really. Like, I just need to knock this off. And then I started a sketch comedy group, non-musical, with some friends in college. And when we graduated, we kind of like took it out into quote unquote the real world. And we were performing on the college circuit and doing little shows around Boston. And then at some point I was like, you know, we do these sketches that are 2 to 3 minutes long and have like a beginning, a middle, and an end. And they kind of heighten over the course of it. And I was like, that's the exact same sized container as a song is. And so then for the first time, I was like, maybe the thing for me to do is to write raps where I can like demonstrate whatever amount of skill I have. But like the joke will be like, this guy, it's so unlikely that he's a rapper. And so he's rapping about like the most unlikely topics you can imagine, spelling bees or, you know, whatever they were. So that was it for a while. And then even that, eventually I was like, this ain't it either. But that was sort of like a little bit of the evolution for me about being involved with this, with the form.
Well, it's very common for people when they're starting out in comedy, and probably every art form, that you are the shadows and the mimicry of whatever influenced you. Obviously, when I started doing comedy, I'm still wearing the Sam Kinison hat 30 years later that I've been wearing. You know, like I've been doing the same thing he's been doing. You know, and you fall into what is you and what is your life eventually, and who you are, your voice and stuff like that. So it's very understandable that when you're listening to, you know, gangster hip hop rap of the 90s, you know, the Dr. Dre's and the Snoop Dogg's and the Ice-T's and the NWAs, that you would like, oh, I'm also going to be writing about those same things until you realize, oh, this is not who I am. Right.
Yeah. And you're making me think about how I feel like the game, just in general, I mean this, in life in general, but also I'll apply it to comedy specifically, that like the game starts before you even know you're playing. So like the music and the comedy that you were listening to when you were a child, like you can see the ways that as an adult, it just continues to be this major formative influence. And then the way that I think about it with comedy is like, I started doing open mics in Boston at Sally O's in Union Square, Sally O'Brien's. And I remember walking into like my first and second open mics, and the people who were there are like still I don't think I had a sense when I started that like the people I was meeting were going to be my colleagues for the duration. I was like, these are just people at the open mic. We're just starting out. But the people I met in my first year of comedy, I'm now, I mean, depending how you define it, I'm now in year like 18 through 25 or something like that. Like it's the same people. Or not. Yeah, right. Exactly. But yeah, it's the same people. It's crazy. Like it starts as soon as you start. Like be nice to everybody right away is like something I would tell my young self, because you're going to know them forever. You, because you mentioned Boston, where I'm living right now, because you started your comedy career here because you went to college at Brandeis. I did.
You're not from Boston.
No.
When you first started doing comedy at college, well, let's just talk about college. Your first time moving away from home.
Yeah.
Was there, was the need to find people to associate with when you're an 18-year-old kid, you know, 800 miles away from home or whatever, however far Ohio is from Boston. I just made up a number. But the, you know, was that like, I feel a lot of people post-college years start doing comedy because they don't know how to make friends.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, I like funny things. I'll go to open mics and I'll start writing comedy. And then you notice they still hang out with comedians, but they do less comedy. So I think we all have some need to find a way to be friends. Was that the comedy team you started in college at Brandeis? Was that the need for creating comedy, or was that a need for creating a social group?
I mean, I'm like a rabbi kid, like I said, and like used to like having to like introduce and meet people and stuff like that. So I never felt like I had a hard time making friends, but I think the comedy group was like, I made a bunch of friends and then they were like, hey, we're starting a comedy group and you're like, there's a few people we're thinking about asking to join. Like, would you be interested in doing that? And I was like, sure. And then now all of them, literally, there were like 7 of us in the group in college, and then 5, and then 4. And then by the time there were 3, we were like, okay, it seems like probably time to wind this down. But I'm the only one still doing comedy. And I was sort of like, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, kind of like, all right, I'll try it. And then when we graduated, a couple of them were like, we're going to try and like make a go of it. Do you want to do it? And I was like, I thought like, since I don't have another plan, okay. But if I had grad school lined up or something, I would be a hell no. But it really took. Like, here I am.
It's such a common story. The most reluctant one of the group to start doing comedy is the only one still doing comedy afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I hate recommendations. Like when people are like, oh my God, you got to see whatever. I'm like, now I'm not going to see it because you told me I have to. But maybe
I have that anti-establishment in me too, that I always have to fight against myself. If it's popular, I'm going to hate it. If you're going to tell me that I should check it out, then I'm not going to check it out. I am constantly fighting that anti-need of conformity.
Totally. It's like, do you think I am sitting around for hours a day twiddling my thumbs trying to figure out something to do? Like, I have no time. I'm only doing the things I've personally... Anyways, that's a separate podcast.
I mean, dude, I could go on for hours about how I don't need Instagram's recommendation of reels for me. Trust me.
Yes.
I will find the content. I know what I like. Some people may need those recommendations, but I am not one of them. Turn it off.
Do those people exist? I think, yeah. So I think that same kind of like, don't come in too hot. Like, let me get there on my own. Like, I think that was key in, maybe if there had been someone else in my group who was like, let's do this, I would have, been kind of repelled and not gone so hard. But as it was, I was like, yes, I'm doing this. I get this. I'm good at this. And I'm going to make it my own.
So when you started doing comedy open mics here in Boston, outside of the college group, was it straight stand-up, or was the inclination to always start doing comedy music?
I am not a stand-up and never have been. I've done some stand-up as part of my act, but it's a specific identity, and I don't cop to it. I love it. I have tons of friends in it. I'm very close to it, but yeah. I was doing songs right away, musical songs. Again, like short, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and like with a premise. They were all about something, and then they would like come to a little grand finale within the song, and that would be it. And then my set would be like 3 of those or 5 of those or however much time I had, with a little banter in between. And it was immediately apparent to me when I started doing it in Boston that it was much closer to the kind of thing I was interested in doing on stage than I was with the group. Like, the group had its strengths, but one of its many weaknesses was like an enormous amount of creative compromise. And then so not only was I happier with the material, but like I felt the love right away in Boston. Like, Rick Jenkins at the Comedy Studio welcomed me in, and I started getting offers to do spots, and it was just like, this is cool. I can tell it's going to get more traction than the sketch group ever had. And so I was like, great, next phase begins.
Well, let's going back to Brandeis again. What were you going to college for?
I mean, family expectations.
Oh, is that a bachelor's degree now?
I mean, not to sound ungrateful, like, I loved college, and I'm appreciative that my late grandmother helped us pay for it. I didn't pay for anything. I was a child, even though I was 18. I got a bachelor's degree in political science, and I really appreciate that I got to go to college. It's like, I mean, I don't know. It's complicated, but like, I'm glad I went and I learned a lot, and I'm not ungrateful for going, but definitely like I didn't study something that was what I wound up doing with my career.
Fair enough. No, it's honestly, there's plenty of people who should probably graduate from college with a major in making my mother happy and a minor in with making my dad not mad at me. So I understand that. That totally. I mean, for me, as like my path for life was to be, I wanted to be on the radio. And so I could have either started bugging a radio station or go to school to learn the industry of radio. And I did. And that got me my job in radio and so forth and so through on. And now I don't work in radio anymore because they decided they don't want me in it anymore. So there we are. But yeah, no, I mean, after 20 years in the business, you got to move on, but it's fine. Cause I always knew that I wanted to be a performer. And to me, one arm of my performer was radio. I always knew I was going to be an entertainer. I knew I was going to be not just a radio jock. I knew I wasn't just going to be a guy working in a radio studio or an engineer. I knew that my first intentions was to go to the college for civil engineering. And I changed my major the day I went to register into radio and television production. Because I knew that this was my path. Obviously, you didn't know what your path was going to be, but after college, you got this political science degree, you're trying for comedy. What were you having to do then to help pay the bills? Because, the podcast of the things we do during the day to support what we want to do at night is also incredibly crucial because we have to figure out how to pay those bills while we're, paying for beers and chicken wings out of our own pocket to tell our yuck yucks.
Totally. Soy chicken wings in my case, but point taken.
Yes.
I didn't mention this when we spoke briefly before we started taping, but my first day job out of college was as a paralegal at a little law firm in Back Bay. And it was, so I loved the people who worked there, which I think is kind of a like unusual thing perhaps to be able to say about like your bosses at a law firm, but it was a small, with all due respect to the legal profession, it was a small firm. It was very humane and the bosses were all really nice. And they also were very flexible about me being like, I need to take a few days off to like go do some comedy shows. I didn't like working there just because I didn't want to be in an office doing the kinds of things you do in an office, but I really, really benefited from seeing what a workplace looked like. And even though it might be unrecognizable to an outside observer to like look at how I work now, and the law office environment, like I picked up a lot that I still apply all the time for like how to be an adult who works. And also seeing how hard those people worked, I was like, oh, you gotta work hard.
Seems like you have a good history of learning good work ethic because you went to college, even though you graduated the degree, even though you're not doing it, you learned what academia was. You learned what you had to learn and how to learn things, how to research, how to follow through on things, how to work within a time crunch.
How to benefit from rampant grade inflation, with all due respect to my alma mater.
And you took the knowledge of a work ethic from jobs post-college, which, let's be honest, we know a lot of talented comedians who also don't have a great work ethic. And then sometimes, it shows in their career why they don't get ahead because they don't put in the efforts and stuff. But it seems like you've been somebody who, since a young age, has been putting in the effort because music in general is an effort. No one is a savant. No one picks up an instrument and automatically knows how to play it. Everyone has to go to lessons. They have to practice. You had to go through the years of practicing how to write rhyme and lyrics and how to tell a story or be able to put a flow together. So,
well, thank you. I'll just say thanks. That's not necessarily how it looks from inside myself, but it's good to have other people's perspective. But yeah, I guess I'll just say, besides thank you again, is that like, I feel like you see stuff and then you kind of hip pocket it. And then it might take like 20 years for it to become like, for it to bear fruit. It's like a tree that you plant in your brain. And then like, so I think I went through a long wilderness of like not working hard and feeling really bad about it and like being super hard on myself. Like I should have worked as hard as I was being hard on myself for not working. And I, that would have been good for me. But yeah, eventually it's sort of like, okay, now I'm an adult and I feel more like the kind of work that I'm doing looks like the work that I used to see the senior partner at the firm do. Like I could tell how hard he was working. Now I feel like my operation looks a little more like that. And so I think about those guys all the time. And I'm sorry to say that I still have dreams about working at that law firm. Like more than 20 years after working there, I will wake up and be like, oh my God, I had a nightmare about like not filing a brief in the right way.
Dude, honestly, my first job as a kid, 15 years old, was selling Italian ice, lemonade, and iced tea at Earl Park at Camden Yards.
Wow.
As a vendor, walking around with the big, huge thing, 15 years old, shaking around. And my first day, I'm selling lemonade, and I'm just walking around. Again, still the beginnings of a comedian and a performer, walking around the Oriole Park at the Orioles game, just going, lemonade here, get your fresh squeezed lemonade, with like some weird, like vaudeville vendor voice.
I love it.
And I woke, speaking of dreams, that night I woke up. This is the first incident in my that I can remember of me sleepwalking, is I'm walking around my bedroom screaming, lemonade here, come get your fresh squeezed lemonade. And I walk into a wall, wake up, and I look around, I was like, oh, I've got to quit this job. Wow. This is too much.
Even at 15. Do you still sleepwalk?
I still have incidents of it, yeah, occasionally. It's mostly now just manifest in talking in my sleep now. Wow. But when a couple years ago, I had really bad sleep apnea, and that exacerbated the sleepwalking, because one of the problems with sleep apnea is that your body's never awake and never asleep.
Right.
And so like when you go asleep and you go into REM, your body releases a chemical that paralyzes you. So when you're dreaming, you don't act out your dream. But if you're not sleeping right because of sleep apnea, sleepwalking, other, they have a fancy word for it, your body will move as if in the dreams. And the big incident was a couple years ago is I backflipped out of my bed and landed on the back of my head. Yeah. Anyway. It through my tongue, dislocated my ribs. It was dude, it was a bad incident.
Dennis.
But that's when I say, that's why I went to the doctors and found out sleep apnea, and I've lost weight and I've cured it. But
great.
So mostly it's talking in the sleep, but so the whole thing of, by the way, so the point I was getting to was I empathize with the having dreams about jobs.
Yeah. I mean, having other people expect you to do something because they're giving you money is like, again, I was a sheltered kid. I didn't really have a lot of emphasis placed on like, you're going to mow the lawn, you're going to get a summer job. I did some of that stuff on my own because all my friends were doing it and it felt weird not to be. But as an adult, feeling the expectation in the professional context, it was like, it wasn't traumatic in any way. It was just sort of sobering maybe. And I think it like made an impression on me. So yeah, it was definitely showing up in dreams.
Well, it's common for a lot of people, a lot of kids to have summer jobs where they're a connection from somebody.
Yeah.
Like, you said you mowed lawns. Was that independent on that? Or were some of your jobs for like your father's friend has a guy who'll get you a job. Is that where some of the younger jobs came from?
I felt like my younger jobs were like, I didn't actually mow lawns. I did have a job as a teenager at TCBY, the frozen yogurt store. And I got the job because I had a crush on a girl who went to my high school, and she was like, she worked there, and she was like, you should get a job there too. And so I applied at her location, and they were like, you're hired, but we know that you're applying here because you have a crush on Carrie, and we're not going to put you two at the same store because that's asking for trouble. So you're going to be at this other location. And I was
you got cock blocked by frozen ice cream.
Yes.
By frozen yogurt.
I did. They saw through my little plan. So, yeah, I had that job. It just felt like fun and games. Like I didn't work very much. I felt sort of like I could, I don't know. It was, as I'm hearing myself say it, I'm like, I had a really sheltered upbringing. Like not everybody has it as easy as I had it. But I think I was like, Yeah, I mean, the job did not feel particularly demanding. The stakes didn't feel super high, I think, until down the line, I started taking work more seriously. But yeah, those early jobs, I felt safety netted. I felt like a kid who, it was like, if I screwed up, the worst thing that would happen would be like, I wouldn't work at TCBY anymore. Also, am I allowed to swear?
Swear away, please. Go for
Those
it.
motherfuckers said some weird shit to me about being Jewish. And so I was always kind of like, I don't take this job too seriously because there's a rot at the center of it.
All right. Well, you have a very, very close connection to your Jewish heritage, obviously, because your mother is a rabbi. That's, kind of a hard thing to escape from it. And it, the like I said earlier about there's the trope of the Jewish kid and the hip hop. It happens in so much media already but then we also have like the success of the Beastie Boys, which is well known for being Jewish guys who rap. So is part of your comedy, do you feel that being Jewish is a huge necessary identity to the comedy, the songs that you write? Or do you think it's just a byproduct of the world that you have lived in? You're like, I'm not a rapper who's Jewish. I just happen to be Jewish and a rapper.
Right. I totally grasp your question. I think, I definitely proudly identify as Jewish. I'm nowhere near an observant Jew, but I'm also not like 0% on the observant Jew meter. But I do think it's a central identity pillar for me. And I think that some of the values that are emphasized in the religion include comedy, music, wordplay, finding connections between things and like exploiting them for impact. Like, I don't know if entertainment is the goal in the religion, but like coming up with like, this thing is related to that thing and you might not have seen it. And isn't that cool? That's sort of like that's part of like Talmudic Judaism and some of the like Torah analysis that happens. And so I think that it's weird to see how much one is part of a societal trend, like little Jewish kids from the Midwest getting super into hip hop in the 90s. I definitely am part of it. And we could dive more deeply into why that appeals so strongly. A lot of it is not flattering to the little Jewish boys who get super titillated by what they're hearing. But yeah, I mean, to the extent that rap is part of my act nowadays, and it still is, though, to me, it's in a different way. Like when I pitch the show to Jewish organizations, which I do sometimes, I'm always like, the show isn't Jewish except for me like mentioning that my mom is a rabbi sometimes, or, other parts of my upbringing that pertain to Judaism, showing a picture of me at my bar mitzvah or something. But while the content of the show is not like, it's not a show about Judaism, but like the Jewish stuff just is woven throughout. It's inextricable. The values of the religion like just are on full display in the content of the show.
Excellent. Well, yeah, it's because you have a cultural identity with something, Punk rock keeps showing up in my life because that's the closest cultural identity I have to anything else. Like I was saying earlier, when it comes to music, that punk attitude, and that those family, friends or family values kind of show up in my everyday life of things too. But it's probably not noticeably overt to other people, as because we understand what a Jewish culture is. I understand nothing about Jewish culture because I didn't live with it. I had a Jewish uncle who died when I was young, and at his funeral, I guess there's a tradition where everybody takes a scoop of dirt and throws it on him. And as an 8-year-old kid, all I could think of, I didn't know that was a Jewish tradition. It was the first funeral I ever been to, and all I could think of was like, man, this is going to take a long time. But a couple years ago, I started working. During the pandemic, I did an AV. I had an AV tech for a Jewish congregation out here in Boston, in Newton. And I've learned so much more about Jewish culture working with them over the past few years. And I think there is a, from what I've noticed, a very close connection to just music and performance in general. The rabbi at this congregation, she, all the sermons or chants and songs. She plays guitar. They have a lot of music involved. Now, granted, I grew up in a Catholic church, and we occasionally had a band come sing our hymns and stuff. But
Sure.
the music there never felt it woven into the religion as much as this reconstructorist congregation did.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how different that is to any other Jewish religion. You don't need to tell me the history of Judaism and the ceremonies at temple or whatever. But I was very impressed when I started working with them with how much of their ceremonies are musical, which I think if you grow up in a society, in a community that is that musical, I think you're just going to naturally gravitate to something that might be musical or performance based.
Yeah. I mean, so the thoughts that come to mind are like one of the seminal core Jewish texts is the Book of Psalms, which is 150. I mean, they're called songs. Like they are all identified as songs. So even though we know them just as printed text and we don't know the like ancient melodies that were used, like they're all intended to be set to music. And also there's like, so conveying information through lyrics is like a core part of the religion. And then also like a lot of the Psalms, just to stick with that for a second, are acrostics. And so like, the first line of them starts with Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The second line starts with Bet. And so when I look at the stuff that I'm doing and I'm like playing the same tricks thousands of years later, I'm like, it's part of it. I mean, it's definitely in line with the tradition. Like I'm not doing it because I just am like, wow, look at that, you old Jew. Like you're bringing it, you're bringing the through line through. So I like seeing that. And it makes me feel like it's chicken and egg, it's tough to say whether I'm doing that stuff because I'm Jewish or somehow being, I don't know, it's like tough to talk it out, but whatever it is, I like spotting the through line. It feels like it's part of a heritage.
I love that you just told me that whatever the Psalms that you were just talking about are acrostics, which are crossword puzzles, which is perfect for a guy that has a crossword puzzle show. Yeah.
There's this, I'll say one other thing just because I think it's cool and interesting. So there's this like numerology wordplay thing that happens in Hebrew where the way it works is like the way it would work in English is like the letter A is worth 1 point and the letter B is worth 2 points. And then when you get to 10, which would be J, then like K is worth 20. L is worth 30. And so you can take a word and add up the math of it and you'll get a number. And then you can find another word that has the same math, like the values of the letters add up to the same thing. And in Judaism, that's viewed, it's not like a mainstream belief, but for people who play these games, that's viewed as like super significant. So like one example I know is that like the word for nature in Hebrew, the value of the letters adds up to the same value as one of the major names for God. And so that's viewed as like not a coincidence, but like a significant secret mystical hint that like nature has a specific beautiful relationship with God and that it's like holy and sacred. So it's like, I mean, that's my shit. When I see that, I'm like, I'm doing that in my shows, man.
Dude, that is both fascinating and frightening because it sounds like the number 23, the movie with Jim Carrey.
Yes. Sure. Right.
Like that is so fascinating. Like the connections of like that is a crazy, insane rabbit hole of numbers and letters. And also the fact that you just know J is the 10th letter of the alphabet. I literally, as you were saying, I was like, A is 1, B is 2, C is 3. I'm counting through my fingers.
Yeah. So again, that's not like, you don't talk about that at like on a weekly basis at services. It's a little esoteric, but it's called gematria. It's definitely part of the religion.
So, all right. So you were doing comedy here in Boston. What inspired the move to Los Angeles, where you're at now?
I was feeling like I had lived in Boston for a long time and I was just personally kind of ready for a change and also sort of very scared to see what ceilings there were out there beyond Boston, but also sort of intrigued by the prospect. And then I got the opportunity to go to the Montreal Comedy Fest. And while I was there, I was really, really green. And in retrospect, I'm sort of like, I wasn't really ready for the opportunity. It didn't go as badly as it could have. I also would have done better if I'd been a little less inexperienced. But that's sort of life in general, and you kind of got to go for it when you can. A manager out there saw me and offered me representation. And I remember he said to me, if I have 100 superpowers at my disposal, I can use 2 of them if you stay in Boston, 30 of them if you move to New York, and 100 if you move to LA. And I came out to LA for a visit. I stayed at his house for a couple weeks. I just hung out and I was like, oh, I know some people here. And like, I remember comedians saying to me like, oh my God, you're going to LA. Like it's going to chew you up and spit you out and you're going to sell your soul in the process. And I came out here and I was like, you know, it's a giant, complicated city with a lot going on. And it's not just the stereotype of like Malibu. Like I don't ever go to Malibu. It's like an hour and a half away from where I live, still within LA. So, you know, I came out and I was like, it's cool. I get it. I even like it. And while that manager turned out to be, shall we say, not a long-term match, I will always be appreciative that he got me out to LA. I've lived here for 14 years.
What was the plan when you got to LA? Because obviously moving, some people are just spontaneous and they move without any plans. Or like, I'll get there and I'll figure it out. Me, I'm like, that's an insane way of thinking. And like when I moved to Boston, it was because I had a job here. And I moved here for a job. And the only reason I never left Baltimore until I was 31 is because I didn't have any other jobs anywhere else. Not that I wasn't applying. I just didn't get them, or the ones that were offered to me weren't financially viable enough. Like, if I'm living in Baltimore scraping to get by, why am I going to move to market 237 to do radio there and also still not financially get by and then be in the 237th most populous city in America, you know?
Yeah.
So for you, what was the plan in LA financially, at least?
When you were describing the first category of people, I was like, this is who I was at the time. You know, it's a double-edged sword. It's not who I am now. Like I would not just be like, hey, LA's cool, but you know what else seems cool? New York. And I know it's a tough city to make a living in, but I'll figure it out. That is the mindset I had when I came to LA. At age 43, it's not how I would roll nowadays. So while I sort of look back at that and it makes me feel anxious at how close to the margin I was, I'm also like, it's cool that I was an idiot and did it, and I'm lucky, and also like, again, cushioned by layers of privilege to have been able to do it and like have a reasonable expectation that it would go okay. And I didn't have a plan. I didn't have very much money, and I don't know. I was 30. I had just turned 30 when I moved, and it was scary. I mean, I was very overwhelmed by the city. I remember my first few months here, I would do whatever during the day, and then I would go to shows at night, sometimes do spots, sometimes do open mics, mostly just like hang out and like meet people. And then I would drive home, and when I would park in front of the first place that I lived in LA, I would instantly fall asleep in my car for like 30 minutes to like an hour and a half. And I would just like jolt upright and then like go inside and go to bed. I was so overwhelmed by being here and stressed out, I think, by not having a great financial plan and also not having a great career plan and just being like, well, in Boston, I achieved some things without super much effort. It'll probably be the same in Los Angeles, which wasn't the case. It was a lot. So yeah, in terms of earning money when I got here, my last few years in Boston, I started doing some tutoring people for their b'nai mitzvah, you know, bar mitzvah for boys, bat mitzvah for girls. Now that gender has changed in the ways that it has, they just say b'nai mitzvah, which is the plural, like they, and it covers it all. But yeah, I was b'nai mitzvah tutoring.
I learned the difference between b'nai and all the rest of them.
Yes,
very quickly while having to do mitzvahs. I just started saying mitzvahs. Yep. And just keeping it as mitzvahs. I'm the dumb goy. Sorry, it's a mitzvah to me. I don't want to offend anybody.
Look, man, even knowing that you're the dumb goy makes you not the dumb goy. Before you knew you were the dumb goy, you really were. Now you're on the path. And also, I reject. That's not how we feel about it. But I like what you said. Yeah, so I started doing that, and I like taught like Hebrew school in a classroom setting. I did one-on-one tutoring. I taught some adult b'nai mitzvah classes for people who had never had them when they were a kid for whatever reason, but wanted to formalize their Judaism as grown-ups. And so when I moved out to LA, I was just like, okay, if you're a Jewish comedian who's getting started and you need a day job, that gig is, I don't know a better gig. Like I haven't seen one that I think is better, because here's how your day goes. You wake up, you go, even if you wake up late, you have time to like go to the coffee shop and write for a couple hours because the kids are in school who you're going to tutor. Then in the afternoon, 3:30 at the earliest, but maybe not till 4, you show up at the temple and you do a few hours of work. And, you know, these temples are affluent, and the kind of people who are paying for like one-on-one bar mitzvah tutoring or bat mitzvah tutoring, b'nai mitzvah tutoring, like it's a good gig relatively. I mean, you're not going to get rich off of it, but like bang for buck, it's pretty good. And then because they're kids, the latest I ever taught a lesson was maybe 7 on like an outlier occasion. So you do like 3 or 4 hours of work in the middle of the day, and then you're free to like grab a bite and then hit the mics and repeat. So it was just like, I was like, I'm glad my mom sent me to Jewish school when I was a kid, and I like learned how to chant Torah and like read the prayer book Hebrew, because I really don't know what I would have done. It was like a life-saving skill set to have in terms of like moving to LA. And there's a billion temples and they need tutors.
Yeah. And it's also not Duolingo. You can't learn it from, you have to go to the temple to learn how to do your Torah readings.
You sort of do. There are people out here who have like, there's someone in LA who has like a, you know, independent, like we'll tutor you for your b'nai mitzvah in whatever style the temple is. But that's unique, and mostly, yes, you do have to get it right from the tap.
Yeah. So, all right. I was holding off to talk about your favorite project that is near and not near and dear, but I love it. And I'm really trying. You know, I'm trying not to fangirl out on the writing for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
Oh,
bro,
let's talk about it.
I love that show, bro. Dude, I've missed the final 2 seasons and I have not caught up on them, and I feel bad that I haven't. But I'll give you a brief overview of why I fell in love with the show. Please. And it is because of your friend Rachel.
Oh, yeah.
She was coming to MIT before the show was even, like when she got turned down from Showtime.
Yeah.
She was coming to do a talk at MIT. She was doing a spot at the studio. At that time, I was running a promotional series of social media and websites here in Boston to help promote the shows. Because when I moved here, I saw there was no promotion for anything. And I decided, instead of complaining about it, do something about it. I created this whole arm of like social media promoting of shows. And her name pops up on the lineup. I'm like, who the fuck is this person? And I look her up. And I'm looking. I was like, oh, she does songs. She's funny songs, this, that. Oh, this or that. You know, I go see her at the studio. Fucking hysterical. She was fucking amazing. Right. And then she goes and does this talk at MIT to the students, for it's basically just like a, you know, corporate college gig. And me and another comedian are the only 2 that went to it. We talked to Rachel afterwards. We hung out with her after the studio. And honestly, Rachel was almost the first guest on this podcast.
Have you had her on?
No. I'll explain. She stopped answering my calls, but
sorry,
or my Facebook messages. I'm sure it's in it. So yeah, so that night, you know, I was like, hey, I would love to sit down and talk to you, have a conversation about comedy, LA, this and that, music and stuff. And this is before we got picked up for the CW. She was like, yeah, sure, not a problem. And then we was like, hey, let's make a plan. And she calls me at like 11:30 at night and goes, hey, I'm jet lagged. Do you want to come have that talk now? Because I'm going to be awake for the next couple hours. And I'm like, nah, I got to get up at 4 a.m. for work because I worked in radio. But let's get together at 10 in the morning tomorrow after I get out of my morning show. She's like, all right, cool. And then she bails on that. She's like, I don't feel well, whatever. But we messaged back and forth about her trying to be a guest when she would come around, and it never ended up happening. But
yeah,
when her show got picked up at the CW, I was like, great, congratulations. Here's somebody I know that's funny and talented. And then I watched the show and I'm like, this show is fucking amazing. Like it went from just like, oh, I'm happy for someone who I know getting a thing to, oh, this is actually something really good. So for you, what was your experience being a part of that show? Because someone who is doing rap gets to be brought onto a show that is a literal musical.
Well, first I'll say, like, I'm sure you've made your peace with it, but like, I hope you don't take it personally. Schedules are complicated, and I'm sure she wasn't.
Oh, no. Rachel's fine. Like, I'm happy for all her success. There's no jealousy. There's no hatred. There's no animosity. No, absolutely. It's funny to be like, hey, we were texting back and forth over Facebook Messenger, and then like, oh, she ever knows she don't answer my text. That's more of she doesn't, but that's fine. She's busy. She has things. I'm not worried about it at all. Now, I'm happy for all her success and continuous. I watched her show with her and Paul Reiser reboot, and the fact that it didn't get renewed, I think, is a travesty because I love Paul Reiser too. So
yeah, the biz ain't fair. I met Rachel at like the musical comedy subset of the LA comedy scene. We would do shows together that were all musical comedians, and we were friendly and hit it off as like interpersonally and would always enjoy saying hi to each other. And I think both saw each other's material and thought it was good, and, had like a nice amount of mutual respect. And then she got the show, and I remember seeing her afterwards, and like, you hear so much about like people get a thing, and it's like, it's so easy. It's amazing that anything ever gets made, let alone anything good, because there's a billion points at which it can go off the rails and you just never know. But I remember from what I read, I was like, this seems like my friend is going to have a TV show. And I remember we did a show at UCB in LA, and I saw her backstage and I said, dude, congrats. And I tell this story whenever I can. She looked at me and she goes, I'm going to have you in to write on the show. And I was like, okay, cool, which is a very easy thing to say. Talk is very cheap. And I've certainly had people be like, you should come in and do a thing, or be like, oh, we're going to have you on. And it doesn't materialize, not because of malice or something, or because they're lying to me, but it's just, life is complicated. But Rachel got the show and she reached out and was like, we're doing a song that kind of has like a Nicki Minaj thing. Like, can you write some verses? We have the chorus, we need the verses. And so the first song I wrote was a song called I Give Good Parent. That was about like showing up at your partner's house and impressing their parents. And it was such a positive experience. And I really was like, it's cool that so much of what we do is like us deciding that the world needs what we have to offer. And so which is good. And like, it takes a lot of belief in yourself, which, some days you have more than others. But I really appreciate getting to be part of like operations like a TV show, because they need a problem solved, and they bring you in because you've got a skill set that can solve the problem. And then when you do indeed solve the problem, it's like, it's validating on like a holistic, quasi-spiritual level. You're like, they needed somebody to write this thing, and I'm one of the people who could have written it, and I did get to write it, and like now it's TV, and it's exhilarating. And so I wrote a few more songs for the show, or worked on a few songs for the show. One of them was called Jap Battle, and that's been sort of like the most, I think, widely viewed of the songs that I worked on. This conversation is not complete without mentioning the name of Adam Schlesinger, who was like at the center of that immense. Rachel's a genius, and part of her genius is that she surrounded herself with like geniuses. And Adam was like an amazing guy. We met a few times, but my respect for him and his talents was like, I can't overstate it. And he died early in COVID, and I was like, it was the first person I knew who died, and I feel emotional talking about it right now. He was a mensch and an incredibly talented musician. But yeah, he was like, this song is cool. But so it started at the time, Drake was in a beef with Meek Mill, and he released a song called Back to Back that I was listening to all the time. I really liked it. And I was like, I'm going to just like parody the Drake thing. And Adam was like, sure, do it for the demo, and then we'll see if it survives. So my first chorus for Jap Battle was like a straight up parody of that song. And then Adam was like, okay, cool. The verses are working, but like that hook, we can't actually do like it was like Jap to Jap. And he was like, we can't actually do that. And so he was like, see if you can come up with a hook. And I had at the time been writing some podcast theme songs with my friend Mike Kaplan. And I was like, I'm a lyrics guy, not a melody guy, but I'm going to try and sing a thing. And I sang a thing and it was like a rough top line and Adam turned it into like a proper chorus. But that song was just like, again, I just was like, I can write a song that goes deep on Jewish inside jokes and I'm going to take a stab at writing a hook, and it all made it in. And I was like, this is, I mean, it's, I'm smiling involuntarily just thinking about it. I love Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and I'm honored to have been part of it. It was a wholly positive work experience.
Like the entire thing really almost seems kismet. They needed someone to write a Jewish rap song or a TV show. They had a problem and you solved it. So check out the beat while the DJ revolves it. Exactly.
One of my other formative.
Dude, I was sitting on that line for 2 full minutes while you were talking.
Yeah. Oh man. Is that what you were writing down? You're like, I can't lose it.
I wrote it down because if I don't get to say it, it's going to go in the tweet for the promo of this episode.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
But yeah, I love I love the passion that, this was a passion project. This is everything that culminated for you coming together. When it comes to like epic rap battles of history and Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, do you had to find yourself writing for the visuals? Because you know that these aren't just lyrical. They're also going to be acted out. People are going to perform them. It's a visual media. Did you think also sometimes when writing certain things is like, oh, when I say this, somebody's going to need to show this thing, or we know what so-and-so looks like, so we're going to write something that verbally references some kind of visual?
I first want to say that there's a certain set of questions that I get asked every time I do an interview, and that is not one of them. So I want to acknowledge that you asked a question I haven't been asked to talk about before.
Dude, that's what I pride myself on, asking people not the same old boring questions like, how did you get into comedy? Did you always...
Totally.
So.
Yes, well, the answer to this is that Rachel was very clear. She would send me like a dossier of like what the beats needed to be, not hip hop instrumentals, but the comedic beats and plot beats. And it was plug and chug, man. I was like, that's my ideal scenario. And I think she had a very clear idea of how it was going to look, and she just needed the connective tissue. And so, I was happy to oblige. With epic rap battles, I now know that I won't pitch lyrics that require a visual gag to sell it. They're like, we need lyrics that are completely independent and can live on their own in all circumstances. If we come up with a visual gag that adds something to it, great. But for the most part, it's just the costumes and the characters rapping against each other. And like, yeah, it's pretty independent of what the visuals are going to look like. And I think they really put a lot of premium on that flexibility, because they, if for some reason it's not working out, then like your vocals are shot and your video is kind of screwed.
Did you find, this might be more of an epic rap battle question, but did you find it difficult to start writing raps for other people after so many years of writing rap songs for yourself and your own voice?
Epic Rap Battles of History is the longest writing job or any job that I've ever had. I literally emailed them before we started podcasting and said, here are my avails for this week. I love having a project that I do not have so much skin in the game of. Like, I'm very committed to doing a good job for those guys, but in the end, it's their thing, not mine, as opposed to like the crossword show where I'm like the guy and the buck stops here and I'm mining my innermost feelings and experiences to like put myself as much as possible into it. I love the contrast of being able to show up to ERB, punch the clock, blast out some bars. They take what they want. I don't feel butthurt if they don't take lyrics that I write. I'm like, cool. Like, I'm here for you. Like, take what you want. I'll generate as much as I can during the time that I'm here. It's really nice. Like I think it's good for people to not have the entirety of what you're working on be stuff that really matters to you. Like, I mean, obviously hard work and doing a good job matter to me, but like, it's much less personal for me to write for ERB than it is to write for the crossword show. And I mean, again, there's pros and cons to that. Like, the highs are higher when I like come up with something for the crossword show that I truly am like, this is the best, truest thing I could possibly write. But also on a bad day at ERB, I'm like, well, I got a couple good lines out there and it's cool. They'll take it. If they don't take it, that's okay too.
Do Do you collaborate well? Because hip hop is kind of a solo venture. I mean, there's groups, but there's also sometimes you collab with, beat makers and people who DJs and stuff like that. But I'm assuming by now you're either finding beats on your own or you're at least making some of them on your own. Where do your beats come from?
Nowadays, a guy named Teddy Rockspin. That's pretty much exclusively whose beats I use.
The children's toy? I love it.
Yes. I found Teddy, and he can kind of do anything, and he's my guy. He lives in LA. I think I collaborate well as long as the status relationships are clear. I love being in ERB because I'm a cog in a wheel and the buck does not stop with me. I love being the crossword show person because I'm very clear that like ultimately the creative decisions like fall to me. And where it gets tricky is stuff with like the comedy group we were talking about from college, where it's sort of like, who is in charge and who gets to make the call as to like whether or not a joke goes into a sketch. Like, I'm not really interested in ever doing that again. And I like it when it's like very clear. We're equals. My status is higher. Your status is higher. It's like dogs, they just need to know who's in charge. It makes them nervous when they are unclear about like where to fall in the pecking order. So yeah, I think collaboration is good when it's very clearly laid out.
Yeah, I've learned over the years where my strengths are is I either need to be in charge or left alone to do my own things. Tell me what to do and I'll go do it.
Yeah.
Or let me be the one in charge and delegate. If I have to work in conjunction with other people where we're all at the same level, that is where I am not at my best performance personally.
It's very.
So I don't think I would ever work well in a band where we're all having to collaborate together, like a musical band.
It really can make you anxious.
And then, so for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, was it more freelance? Did it seem more like freelance work, or were you in the writer's room?
No, I was definitely like a day player brought in, or I would just do my work in a vacuum. I'd send it to Adam. He would review it, give me notes. I'd send another draft. He'd bring that to the producers and to Rachel. And then I think one day there was one song that had a little bit more of a tricky genesis than others. And so they were like, we're going to bring you in and like, we're going to sit down and like hammer this thing out and get it done.
Excellent. And then we've talked about the crossword puzzle show, but we haven't really told anybody what it is, which, by the way, I want to point out, I was looking up the crossword puzzle show and it seemed very similar to a show I like during the pandemic. I tried to create a YouTube show called Word of the Day with Comedians, where we would take a word, define it, and then come up with the craziest, funniest, most absurd sentence we could using that word in context.
Great concept.
I love the show. The problem was I tried to do it 5 days a week, which was
that's
insane
brutal.
and stupid. Yeah,
that's
that was dumb. And it didn't go, but it was a good fun time. And I saw your crossword puzzle show. I'm like, oh, I love what you're doing here. I'm not a wordsmith. I just came up with a good concept for a fun, interesting riff comedy show. And you also have a great version of one that you have put work into it. So tell everybody exactly what is the crossword puzzle show that you're touring the country at right now.
Yeah, so it's called the Crossword Show. And the basic concept is a panel of comedians solves a custom-made crossword puzzle live on stage in front of a crowd. Everything is projected on a big screen so that the crowd can like follow the action. The clues work like normal crossword clues, but they're also rhyming rap lyrics. So there's an across clue rap and a down clue rap over the course of the song. Whenever the comedians get an answer right, I do some material inspired by the answer word. It all starts coming around and calling back and connecting together. And it gets pretty far out. And then the grand finale is a rap that incorporates all the themes we've been building during the show, but also includes every one of the answer words from the solved puzzle in the order that they appear in the grid. So that's the long, detail-y version. The quicker, punchier version is it's the New York Times crossword puzzle meets Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me on NPR with more rap than you'd expect.
Excellent. Well, I can't wait to see it live in person on Friday, June 21st at the WBR City Space right here in Boston. And of course, all my friends who are in the DMV area, you can check out the Crossword Show on Sunday, June 23rd of that weekend at Planet World. And I urge all my DC area friends, DC, Maryland, Virginia friends, Check it out. And of course, you're going to be...
It's called Planet Word. It's like a language museum in DC.
Right? It's perfect.
Awesome. Yeah.
Sorry. And then, of course, check out crosswordshow.com. Zach, it was so great having you on the show. And we always kind of like showed up, like when you would occasionally come to town, I'm pretty sure you did a city side space, but I know we've also crossed paths at the Comedy Studio and stuff. And it's just very tangentially, hey, what's up? Yeah, whatever, good set, this, whatever. Barely ever talked, but it was really nice having a good long conversation finally.
Thank you so much, Dennis.
My pleasure.
This was so nice, and you asked such good questions and really gave me an opportunity to think about life. So thanks.
My pleasure. All right, take care.
Okay, man.